Hello, everybody, and welcome to our February edition of our Cybersecurity Awareness Program. We're just going to give it just a few more minutes. We've got a lot of folks here today, so looks like there's a couple of people joining still, so just give us just about 20 seconds here, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, it looks like it's kind of calmed down with the folks joining us here. Good morning, everybody. We've got a full house, which is great. Glad to see everybody is able to join us this morning during this presentation. It's important, and it's great that you guys are able to join us this morning. So let's go ahead and get started here. So what is this all about? Well, obviously we're here for cybersecurity. My name is Brian Powell. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at PCA Technology Group. I'm also a certified ethical hacker. And all that really means is that most of, if not all the stuff I'm talking about here, I have the capability of actually doing physically. So it's really just a kind of you have to have that knowledge in order to stop the bad guys sometimes. Because you got to know what they're doing. So that's really all that means. So why cybersecurity? Well, if you take a look on this screen here, at least on the right-hand side, you can kind of see some very well-known company logos over there, and we'll get to that here in a second. But one thing to keep in mind is, and these stats just finally came out. I was waiting for these stats to add them, and they finally came out not too long ago. That last year in 2022, there was a 30% or 38% increase in cyber attacks. Some of those numbers are driven by just the sheer force of some of these hackers or ransomware gangs and things like that. And they're really focusing, ever since COVID hit, they're really focusing on remote workers, educational institutes, and institutions, and also healthcare organizations. So they're really targeting some critical infrastructure stuff. And as you can see on the side here, they're going after a lot. And there's some pretty big companies on the side here. You got Google, you got PayPal, you got Uber, T-Mobile, MailChimp. Every one of those have had some type of breach this year, or right at the end of last year, either December. In the last 3 months, all of these 7 companies have had some type of breach or cybersecurity incident. And these are very, very, very large companies that have probably unlimited budgets to be able to try to protect themselves. And if they're still getting breached, you've got to do what you can, because smaller folks, what chance do we have here? But I will talk about how some of these happened. It really is something that can be stopped, and a lot of it has to do with what we're going to talk about here. So moving on. The other thing to keep in mind is that, when hackers do get into your systems, if they were able to get into your systems, they're not going to send up all kinds of red flares or alarm bells or, taunt you saying, haha, I got you, things like that. They're going to kind of mosey around your systems. They're doing a couple of different things. First of all, many times the victim isn't a targeted attack. Think of it as throwing a net out into a body of water, and you pull the net in. You're not going to know if there's anything in there until you get the net in. That's kind of what the bad guys do. They kind of send out, emails and things like that to folks, and just wait for someone to grab a hold of one of those emails and move forward. So they're in there looking around. First of all, they got to figure out who they have, what company they breach. Second of all, what they'll do is they'll kind of investigate and try to pivot around internally and figure out that what is there any valuable data there? Is there private trade information that they might be able to extort money from you? Is there credit card information? Is there customer information? Is there any type of health record information? Things of that nature. And a lot of times what they'll do one of two things, and it's possibly a combination of both. They'll either take your data and try to sell it on the dark web, and tell you that in order to stop them from doing that, you have to pay them a certain amount of money. It's basically extortion. And the other thing is they could end up encrypting your data, and then in order for you to gain access to that data, you have to pay them a fee to unlock that data. That's ransomware, basically. So they're basically holding you hostage to your own data where you can't access it. So the idea is to try to avoid all of these potential pitfalls, to avoid that whole scenario. Sometimes they do both. Sometimes they ransomware you and threaten to sell it, so they try to get you on both sides of the coin, unfortunately. So the idea is to try to avoid this, and hopefully with some of the topics that we're talking about here, it will help eliminate some of that. So who is responsible? Everybody. Everybody's sitting on this call right now and listening to this. What do we got? Over 60 right now. All 60 people that are on this call are responsible. Many folks think that, well, you know what? It's the owners of the company. It's my IT department. It's not my problem. Well, if you're a computer user, you are responsible. And the reason why you're responsible, we call it the human firewall. So as we get into this presentation, you'll see that many of the tactics that are used by the bad guys are really targeting the end users, because it's much easier for me to bypass all of the security systems that you have in place, whether it's physical or electronic or network. If I can get somebody on the inside to pretty much let me in. That's really what it is. So the easiest way to bypass a security in place is to do it through somebody that's already on the inside. And we call that the human firewall. And it's a must-have for pretty much every organization, no matter what size you are. If you're a simple mom and pop shop, or if you're a huge organization that has many employees, then you need to be part of this procedure. And to put that in English terms, think of it this way. Let's say on your private home, you may have an alarm system. You may have purchased an alarm system to try to protect yourself, your family, your valuables, and things like that. Well, that alarm system is only as good as how often you arm that system. So, if you're inside your home, I happen to come up and knock on your door. If your system isn't armed, I just pretty much breached. If you open that door to figure out who it is, or to at least talk to me, I've pretty much bypassed your alarm system at that point. Because one, it wasn't on, or maybe you disabled it to see what I was there or whatever. That's just one of those examples, and it's kind of the same thing that the bad guys do too. And we'll explain how they do that. So what is this process called? It's called social engineering. It's basically manipulating human behavior to get them to do what you want to do, or to trust. It's super simple to do, and you would be shocked how easy this is to get people, to do things and react in ways that you want them to react. So we're going to show you some of the tactics that is done and how to possibly avoid that. Most common tactics and the attack vectors, probably 90 to 95% of the social engineering attacks happen with email. So if you can lock that part down, you're covering a huge portion of that attack vector that the bad guys use to try to avoid letting them in the door. And we'll talk about what that is. It's done with phishing. It could be done with spear phishing. We'll talk about what all that is. Or BEC, which is business email compromise. A lot of times what they'll do is try to get in to your email systems and use previous conversations to manipulate others that you've already communicated with. So that they tend to use your email once they're in, because they breached your email, and then try to manipulate others using that already built trust with you. Social media is also a thing we'll touch on, and that's a lot of reconnaissance. I can get a lot of information from social media, and I'm not just talking about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those. I'm talking about LinkedIn as well. I can actually get a potential target list once I figure out what the company is, because most businesses, their employees have followers on their LinkedIn, and I could pretty much build the list out of who all those people are. It could be done with fake friends as well too. We already mentioned about some of the trends, ransomware, obviously, extortion, and even automation. And that automation thing is getting very, very scary. If anybody has been following the news and kind of the upcomings on all the AI stuff that's out there right now, you may have heard of Chat GPT and things like that. It's actually very, very scary when it comes to what the capabilities and how that AI can actually be manipulated and utilized for cybersecurity stuff too. So we're not going to get real deep into that right now, but just be aware that there is some automation stuff out there through AI that also assists with some of this. Who's behind it? Many times it's malicious, it's terrorists or third world nations, but there are potential where it could be a malicious insider, shadow IT. So it's something that you got to be aware of. You got to know who's working for you and things like that, because the bad guys are really trying to entice internal people to with promise to pay that hey, you help us get in, we'll give you so much money and whatever. And that's happened a few times. Excuse me, for some bigger companies. Amazon, it happened at Amazon where there was an internal employee that let bad guys in intentionally or sold some internal information. They did get caught. So there's always the chance of that. So you've got to be careful and make sure that you don't have something like that going on. Many times the attack vectors are done via the internet or cloud. Sometimes it is done mobile. Very rarely is it on-site unless it's a targeted attack. So it's not usually something that you have to worry about, but most of the time it's internet-based. So how's this done? So let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about web surfing, because some of this does revolve around the internet. Excuse me. So I recommend, if you keep your website surfing limited to business use only, you will definitely shrink your potential attack vector, because if you're not going on sites that could be questionable and things like that, you may be able to avoid clicking on certain things that are there. You're not searching for things. That's another tactic right now that the bad guys are using. They're actually using Google and the SEO metrics, and they know that if they put a fake site and get enough traffic to that site, it'll actually go to the top of Google's search. And if it's a paid ad, they're actually investing money to get to that top spot. So when people click on, let's just say, just for instance, let's say you're searching for PayPal because you don't know what the PayPal address is or the URL is. So you type in Google PayPal, and at the top of the list shows up. It could be if the bad guys want to try to target PayPal, not specifically, but users trying to go to PayPal. They'll pay for those ads and manipulate the system to try to get to the top of that list, and folks click on that link, and then it could end up taking them to a malicious site where it's actually stealing their PayPal information instead of logging them into the real PayPal. So if you keep that surfing limited to business use, you avoid a lot of those common tactics. And we'll touch a little bit more on that as we get in, because it does kind of tie with email as well too. The other thing too, when it comes to web surfing, unless you're a company, and I know a lot of companies do this, unless you're using social media for marketing purposes or something like that, I recommend staying off social media on your work computers. Again, there's a whole lot of things on social media that people just don't realize what type of information they're giving away there. Even if you think your account's private, it's not. I can tell you that no matter what your settings are on your account, and you think you have a private account, it's not necessarily private. It is to an extent, but again, if it's on the internet, it's out there for everyone to see. Just keep that in mind. So whatever you're posting out there, it is out there and will always be out there for everyone to see. There's all kinds of archival things out there that can go back, the Wayback Machine and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff out there. You can see things from pretty much the beginning of the internet. So just remember, anything you're putting out there on the internet, it's out there, and it will probably remain out there for a very, 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 very long time. Stay away from social media unless you absolutely necessarily need it. Keep your browsers updated. Most of the browsers nowadays automatically update and they tell you that there's an update pending. So if you see that on Google Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Edge, regardless of what your browser choice is, please make sure you're keeping those up to date as frequently as possible, because the bad guys leverage holes in the browser to try to get into folks remotely. So just be aware of that. The other thing too is, a lot of times be aware that pop-ups and download links could be malicious, and a lot of times the pop-up links are the thing that gets you. So you want to be aware that, again, if you keep your surfing limited to business use, you could potentially avoid a lot of those pop-ups that come up that could be malicious. However, if you find yourself on a site and you're not 100% sure about it, most of the modern browsers nowadays do have pop-up blockers in them. However, you can hit Control W or Alt F4. That will usually close down either the window with focus, which is sometimes that pop-up window, or the Alt F4 will actually close the browser down. The reason why we say that is because if it is a malicious pop-up, what happens is it pops that screen on your thing, and they know you're going to click either the close button or the little close X at the top there. The bad guys know you're going to do that, and if it's a malicious pop-up, what they have is called a pop under. So what it is there's actually a window sitting underneath that pop-up that you can't see, but when you click on one of those two areas, it's not only closing out that top window, but it's also activating a download in the background that you don't even realize is happening, because of that window's underneath the one you're looking at, and it will actually download potentially a malicious software or a way for them to remote in the back end without you even realizing it. So it's just something to be aware of, that, in order to avoid those, if the pop-up blocker in the browser doesn't catch that, you can hit Control W or Alt F4, and that should hopefully get rid of that window without you having to click on anywhere in that area there. This is another one that's happening. So, this is targeting people that don't want to remember umpteen passwords and umpteen logins for all the different sites they go to. So they want to leverage single sign-on. And what is single sign-on? Single sign-on is utilizing one of your existing logins to potentially log into another site if it has that capability. In this case, could be Microsoft, could be Facebook, could be Apple, Google, Discord, Steam. All those have the capability of potentially logging into other sites if those other sites allow that type of login, where it uses your existing credentials for one of those sites, and that's how it authenticates. Here's the problem. The bad guys know that folks are doing this, so what they do is they set up malicious versions of these single sign-on windows. And what happens is it will come up and it will allow you to link your account to that. And what it'll do, it'll let you log into the site, but what it's also doing is sending your credentials back to the bad guys. So you're basically giving them your password information for whatever account you're using here. And the problem is it's really easy to fall for, and if you're not careful, it's extremely difficult to detect visually. You can't tell visually, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So here's an example of, let's say we're on a site, and this site, you decide you want to use single sign-on, and you want to use your existing Facebook account. In this case here, you can see on the left-hand side here, this is a malicious version of that window, and on the right-hand side is the real version. If you can see on the presentation here, there's padlocks in the corners on both of them, so they are secure. If you actually click on that padlock, it'll show that it is actually Facebook. The URL is the exact same thing as the real one. The content is the exact same thing. It looks exactly like the real version of it. So what happens is, if you put your information in here, your email and your password, you hit log in, it will tie it to whatever site you're logging into, but it is also sending the information to the bad guy. So you basically gave them your email and your login information. Again, this is extremely, extremely difficult to detect. Again, Phishing site. This is an example using Google. Same exact thing. The only difference on this one is the fake one has a create an account. The real one doesn't, but that wouldn't even raise alarm bells for anybody, because you would think, oh well, if I don't have an account, I can create one. But again, padlock. If you click that, it's going to show it's going to Google. This URL is the exact same thing as this URL. So visually, there's no way for you to tell which one is the real site and which one is not the real site. I think, yeah, that's it. So what I will tell you, there is a way to detect this. Because of how the bad guys are manipulating this technology, if you find yourself on a website that, let's say you do want to sign up for a website and you do want to use either Facebook or Google or whatever one of those other existing accounts that you have, but you're not sure if it's a real version of it or if it's a bad guy trying to steal your information. Here's how you can tell. So again, visually, you're not going to be able to tell any way, shape, or form. But what you can do is, let's say you're on a site and you want to use this. So in the real site, if you grab the top of that window and click on that with your mouse, and you try to drag that outside of the browser window, so your existing window, let's say you're using Chrome, and if you're using Chrome, you grab that top bar and you drag that whole window outside of the browser. If that window breaks past the browser and pops up on its own, that means it's the real site. That's the easiest way to detect it. If you do that with the fake one, what you're going to find is that fake one will not break outside of that browser window. And if it doesn't, do not put your credentials in there, because it's the way this is designed by the bad guys. It will not allow that window to break out of the browser window, where the real one will. So that's the only way you can really tell right now if it's a real one or if it's a fake one. So again, just grab that window and try to drag it outside of the screen. If it actually breaks out on its own outside of the browser and lets you drag it off the browser screen, it's the real one. If it's locked and pinned to the borders of the screen, it is not the real one. So just be aware of that. That's the only way you can really tell at this point in time. So be careful. Moving on to email tips. Again, we'll hit a little bit more on the web surfing stuff too, because it kind of ties right into this. Same concept. Email, do not use your work email for personal use. What do I mean by that? Well, at this point in time, most of the big reasons to do that was Christmas, Black Friday stuff, things like that. Don't use your work email for shopping. Your Amazon shopping or your Christmas shopping or your gym memberships or your book clubs or your whatever it is. Don't use your work email for that type of stuff if it's personal. Why? Because the bad guys do and target folks using fake shipping notices, fake purchases, fake eBay things, PayPal accounts, all that kind of stuff. If you're not doing that in your work email, you don't even have to open those emails up. You can say, well, I don't buy anything from Amazon in my work email. Delete. You don't even have to open it. You don't even have to open it to look at it. If you are doing that stuff and you're mixing your personal with your business, you could fall for one of those tactics. Your iTunes, that's another one. All that stuff. Don't use your work email for that stuff. Use your personal email for that. That way you have that whole separation and isolation. And if you follow that procedure, you will keep yourself and avoid probably 90% of the attacks that happen out there with phishing. So I'm just throwing it out there. The other thing too is make sure that you're not accessing your personal email while you're connected to your work PC. So, don't go into the web interface of your personal email because you're doing that on a work PC. And if you happen to open something up that is malicious, it's going to be opened on your work environment. So it's almost like you're using your work email for your personal usage. If you want to check your personal email, do it on your cell phone. Make sure you're doing it on the data plan on your cell phone and not on the wireless network internally. Or if the wireless network is isolated, then that's a little different. But check your personal email on your own device, on your own bandwidth. And then you'll stay much safer that way. So how does all this work? We'll talk about this. So the other thing that we're recommending is disabling the reading pane. That is this window over here on the side in Outlook. This is for Outlook users, obviously. And you can see there's a little screen here that kind of shows you the contents of the message here that's highlighted at the top. The problem is that this feature opens up emails automatically without you having to do anything. And that's not what we want. We want you to visually look at the email to see if it makes sense. And if it does, then maybe investigate a little bit more by clicking on it and going in to look at it. If you visually inspect that and say, well, again, hey, this is an Amazon email. Why am I getting that? I don't use that for my work because I follow what Brian mentioned, the slide before. I would never do that. Well, guess what? If you're using Reading Pane, this is opening that email up for you. So, and that's a problem. So what we want to do is make sure that's disabled. To do that, you can go up to the View tab here that's highlighted in the screenshot. Select that Reading Pane there. If you hit that drop-down arrow, I think it says right, bottom, and off. Obviously, select off. This pane goes away, and now you have to double-click all of your things that come into the screen here. You double-click them, and then it would show you that. But again, that's you manually opening that email, not some automatic feature in your software here. So that's why we recommend that. So, as mentioned, 95% of the social engineering attacks come from emails. So how does it happen? Here's how it happens. Phishing emails. What is a phishing email? Here's an example of it on the screen. And there's multiple versions of phishing. We'll talk about each one of those. This is an email that is appearing to come from Microsoft Outlook. So what they do is they send this to a bunch of users, perhaps. It looks like it's coming from Microsoft. And it's basically saying my password's expired. Oh no, my password's expired. Holy cow. What am I going to do? If I can't get my email, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do my job. I'm not going to be able to do this. Exactly. That's how they get you. They want to put you in that situation where you're not thinking rationally. So what do you do? Well, oh, look at this. Hey, they include a handy dandy link here that tells me to change my password, or I can click here to change my password. Great. Let's just go ahead and do that. Well, that's what they want you to do. So what happens if you click on one of these two areas? It's going to take you to a website that is purposely built by whoever, the malicious person that sent you this fake email. And it's going to look like Microsoft. And what's going to happen is you're going to put your username in there. You're going to put your password in there. And it's probably going to give you some kind of an error message. One of two things is going to happen. That's going to continue. Every time you put your username and password in there, it's going to continue to give error messages, and you're finally just going to give up on it. Or one of the times that you put your error message or you put your username and password in there, it could potentially work. So what is going on here? Well, the site, as I mentioned, is set up by the bad guys. It is set up to harvest your account information. So again, much like the single sign-on that we already talked about, any information that you're typing into that website is going to get recorded and sent to the bad guys. So you're basically giving up your username and your password because you clicked on one of these two links that points to a malicious website. Why it might work, it depends on the bad guys and how sophisticated they are. Sometimes they just have it keeps looping and looping on the same site, and obviously it's not a real site, so the login information isn't going to work. It's just built to harvest information, so you're giving them your same username and password over and over and over and over and over again because it's not the real site. Smart bad guys, or smarter bad guys, they'll do that one time, and then they will redirect you to the correct Microsoft site. So the second time it actually works, and you think you just might have fat-fingered or mistyped your password the first time, so you don't even think anything of it. So that's the smart bad guys. Because you don't even really think that, oh, I must have just mistyped my password, and you go about your merry old way and not really think about the first time. But you did actually send your password information because it was a bad site. So how do you avoid these type of things? Well, first of all, if you get one of these emails, and there is some situations where you might get an email like this where your password's been whatever, it's expiring, or maybe you changed your password, whatever it is. You might get one of these emails. So what do I recommend? If you are a Microsoft M365 client and you use their services, regardless whether it's coming from them or anybody else, never, ever, ever click on any links that are buried in emails or included in emails. Just don't do it. And there's a few situations, and I'll talk about what that is, where I would say you could do it, but in almost all cases, never, ever, ever click on links buried in emails. What I want you to do instead is, again, if this looks like it's coming from Microsoft Outlook and you think this is valid, great. Okay, I'm an Outlook user. I don't want my password to expire. No sweat. How do you solve the problem of falling for this tactic? You go and you'll open up a brand new browser, whatever your browser of choice is, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, whatever it is. You go to Microsoft's site yourself by typing that in and going to the site yourself. First of all, you know you're getting to the right site. And second of all, when you put your information in there, you know you're on the right site too. You're not blindly following potential links that look like it's going to the right site that it might not really be going to the correct site. So that's how you avoid that potential pitfall. Type it in yourself, then log in. And we'll show you a couple other instances of that. Here's another one. Again, same concept. This one's coming from a bank. So in this case, it's saying we need to validate a potential withdrawal in another country. Please click on this link to do that. Again, you click on this link, it's going to send you to a malicious site that looks just like Trusted Bank, and now you're giving up your bank credentials. So your username, your password for your banking account, you just gave to the bad guys by following this link. If you are a Trusted Bank customer, or M&T or Citizens or whatever the local banks are here in Western New York, if you're one of those customers and you get one of these emails, do not click on the link. What I want you to do is go to a brand new browser window, type in M&T Bank or Citizens Bank, or in this case, Trusted Bank, yourself. Type it in yourself in the browser URL, go there, log in that way. That way you know you're getting to the right site because you physically typed it. Follow that. Don't click on the links, and you will avoid so many potential social engineering attacks via email that your problem goes away, literally. It almost literally goes away by just following those simple rules. So we did talk a little bit about spear phishing. So what's the difference between phishing and spear phishing? So spear phishing is a little more targeted, where phishing is kind of scattershot. So think of it walking up to a pond that you have no idea if there's any fish in there. So you're just throwing breadcrumbs in and hope a fish comes up and you can see if there's a fish in there. Spear phishing is there's a fish in there and you're specifically trying to catch that specific fish. In this case, most of the time it targets HR folks, payroll folks, things of that nature, and they target them by pretending to be someone internal, an internal employee, and they usually send a request that asks them to change their direct deposit information, and they would like that changed immediately. So what they do is they reach out to the person pretending to be an employee and say, hey, I want my direct deposit information changed. Can you change that immediately? Because I either changed my banks or something of that nature, or I want the money to go to a different account. If you are a company that does not have policies and procedures in place to verify that this is a valid request, and you just blindly follow this email, I'm going to tell you you're going to fall into a huge pitfall because you are going to end up sending someone's payroll to a drop account that was probably set up with fake credentials, and the minute that money hits that account is emptied and closed, and the bad guy who set that up is gone with the wind. So you are out your money, and you also need to recomp the employee that you thought you were sending it to that you didn't send it to because they didn't get paid. How do you avoid this again? If you get this type of request via email, you don't blindly follow it. You get that person, whoever it's claiming to be, you get that person in front of you and you verify physically, or you get them to sign writing, or a combination of the two, or you contact them via a known landline or cellular number that you have on record for that person, not some number that they send via the email chain as well. It's got to be a verified number, or you have to physically physically have that person come in and sign. That's the only way you should be doing these type of requests. That way you're protected, the employee's protected, and you avoid this potential pitfall. So whaling is pretty much what it says. You know, they're going after the big fish. So they're either pretending to be the big fish or they are going after the big fish, and the big fish are C-level folks. So what happens here is a lot of times the bad guys, in this case, it's someone pretending to be the CFO. I'm assuming Sean in this case is somebody that probably works either in the financial department or under Sean, or under Roger, I mean, and basically asking for wire transfers. Again, if you blindly follow this and just send a wire transfer without verifying this is actually your CFO making this request, you're going to be out that wire transfer money. Another tactic is Amazon cards or eBay cards or things like that. If you're getting requests via email only from anybody internally, you need to verify physically or at a known good number that it is actually the person doing that, because the bad guys do this all the time. And they try to leverage, oh, well, this is the CEO. Well, I can't question my CEO. I can't do that. I'm just an employee. I can't question my CEO. You know what? Yeah, you can, and you better, because if it's coming in via email and you blindly go out and buy Amazon gift cards, I think you're going to get an earful from your CEO or CFO for not validating it versus, you know, validating that it is actually that person. So just keep that in mind. You're looking out for the best interests of the company, and any CEO or CFO that opts to reprimand you, shame on them then, because you're looking out for the best interest by questioning this type of thing. It shouldn't be done via email only. So just keep that in mind. So how can we stop this? There's a pretty easy way to it may not stop it, but it will at least give you some alerting possibilities. So how's that done? Here's how it's done. You can activate what's called an external sender banner, and that's pretty much this yellowish window at the top of the screen here, that when an email comes in from outside of your organization, it will include one of these emails. Why is that important? Well, because if we go back on one of these other screens here, this is someone pretending to be Roger. This is someone pretending to be an employee. Obviously, you know, we redacted some of this information, but this is not your email address that this is coming from. This isn't the company email address. This is a fake email address. Same thing here. This may not be your actual email for your company. So what happens is, if somebody that is pretending to be an inside person is emailing you and it has one of these email addresses on it, it's probably not the internal person. It's a visual way to pick up very, very quickly, because internally it would never go from the outside in. It would route internally in your internal email system, and it would not place this banner on there. So if you're seeing an email come from what is supposedly somebody that works inside your company using a quote unquote company email, it would never have one of these banners. But if it does have one of these banners, it's probably not the real person. So it's a visual way to figure that out. Now, sometimes this is pretty non-intrusive. So all of your external emails coming in from outside your email domain would have this. You could take this a step further, because, you know, obviously, excuse me, you're not going to see this right out of the gate unless you open it up. But you can also add a subject line here that says external. So you can put external and then what the subject is. That way you can see it on your cell phone. You can see it on, you know, just quick visually. Some clients opt to do that. Now, this is a free thing. If you're on Microsoft 365, this is a free option. All you got to do is enable it. So there's no cost to this to do it. And if you're not doing this, I would highly recommend you are doing it. Whether you want to do the subject or not, that's completely up to you. Some people say, I love it because I don't even have to open it. Other people say, well, it makes it so hard to see what the actual subject is. But it's really up to individuals. But that's how you can avoid a lot of those emails that are pretending to be internal folks very, very easily. So the bad guys realize that, people are getting a little more cautious and a little smart in regards to just blindly following things and blindly clicking on things. So they had to up their game a little bit. So how do they do that? Well, here's how they're doing it. It's called consent phishing, and this is a new tactic that they're using that is basically using Microsoft applications and permissions to access your email now. So what does it do? Well, what they're doing is they're popping up this application window, which is this window over here in the corner that says, permissions requested. And if you get one of these on your screen, if you're a client of ours, I want you to call our support desk before you click on anything, because there is not many reasons that this should be popping up. And if you blindly just hit accept here, what you're doing, if you're not careful, is you're giving whoever created this application full-blown access into your entire Microsoft ecosystem. That means your mail, your OneDrive, your calendars. They can send mail as you, they can read mail as you, and if you have multi-factor, and we'll talk about that, this also bypasses that too. So you're basically giving them the keys to the kingdom in Microsoft if you blindly click on this accept, if you're not careful. So that's why I said, if you are a client of ours, please call our support desk. We can quickly see if there is a valid reason for this. Sometimes, like if you use a CRM or ERP package, sometimes it will want to hook into your Microsoft Outlook. That's a valid reason for this, but the bad guys are really trying to leverage this for folks just blindly clicking on it, not thinking about it, and then they realize that their systems have been breached, and then they can leverage all that information. So if you're not a client of ours, obviously, I would recommend talking to either your current IT provider, calling them, reaching them out so you're not clicking on this blindly, or if you have an internal staff, an internal IT staff, that's another approach to take. But you definitely do not want to just blindly click on this stuff without knowing. So just be aware of that. Next one up is quishing. What is quishing? Well, everybody loves these little QR codes, but guess what? You have no idea where you're going. You have no idea where you're going when you scan one of those things. And last year, if anybody recalls, at the Super Bowl, it was marketing genius, but scary at the same time. Someone actually, I forget what company it was, but it was an ad during the Super Bowl, and all it was a QR code bouncing all across your screen on a blank screen. It was either black or white, and this code was just bouncing like Pong, for those of us that remember that back in the Atari days. It was just bouncing back and forth on the screen, and they got so many people there was like 1 million people that scanned this code. There was no words, no nothing. It was a blank screen with this code just bouncing around the screen. And people got their phones out and literally scanned it and just blindly followed this thing. Now, in that case, it wasn't malicious. It was harmless. It was marketing genius. But it just goes to show how quickly people are to just scan these things with their phones without even thinking about it. So if it were a malicious code, I could send you anywhere I want. You wouldn't even realize it until you're already there. So be careful what you're scanning with your codes and stuff. In this case, it's this is a malicious one. It's basically trying to say you got a voicemail. What'll happen is you'll scan that, and it'll probably send you to a Microsoft or a SharePoint login screen where it's going to ask you to put in your Microsoft credentials. You're going to do that, and again, it's going to send that information to the bad guys. In a targeted thing. Ever since COVID, a lot of times restaurants are using touchless menus. So if I was physically in the area of somebody I actually wanted to target and try to breach, I could easily drop a malicious QR code in a local restaurant, pretending it was a menu system. And people will be scanning it left and right, thinking it's a menu system when I could be installing backdoors on their phones, and you don't even realize it until it's too late. So just be very, very careful on what you're scanning and what you're not scanning with your phone and the QR code thing. I understand the concept behind it, but I'm fairly cautious just because I know what the bad guys do. And this is an extremely easy way to get people to fall for it. So just be aware of that. So with that in mind, let's move on to USB and mobile devices. So USB really is the little USB flash drives. I think I have. Oh, I do have one here. The little USB flash drives. This is a fairly large one. They do have smaller versions of it. If you're using these or you find one of these laying around on the ground, please don't plug this thing into your machine to figure out what's on it. Again, it could have malicious software on it that once you plug it in, it automatically runs. You don't realize it, and it could let a bad guy in from the outside. If you do find one of these laying around, if you're a client of ours, you can give it to one of our guys when they're on site. They will actually bring it back to me. I will put it in what's called a sandbox environment, just in case there is something malicious on it. It won't harm anybody. We'll clean it off. We'll give it back clean, and you guys can do what you want. If we can figure out who the owner is, we'll try to figure that out too. Excuse me, but just don't do that. If you are using this to transfer files back and forth, maybe from home or photos, some of our architects may use this for CAD drawings because CAD drawings are very large, and a lot of times you can't send those via the internet easily. Just be aware that wherever you're moving them back and forth, do virus scans on either side, because something could hitchhike perhaps from one machine to the next on this device. So just be aware of that. You also want to make sure that your virus updates and is updated, and all of your OS updates are being done too. Should be set to automatic if you're a Microsoft user. Macs, you can do that as well. However, I know a lot of times if it's a huge step on the Mac side, a lot of times folks won't activate that automatically because sometimes there's some issues there with some other software. So you got to be careful. The other thing too is mobile phones. Obviously, almost everybody probably nowadays has a smartphone, and unfortunately, these things are battery hogs. So what I want to make sure that you're not doing is that, while most of the charging cables are USB based, or you plug this in and then the other end is a USB, a lot of folks sometimes will plug that into your desktop or your laptop to charge your phone. While it will do that, what you may not realize is it also turns your phone into a USB device. So files could potentially be transferred back and forth, and things of that nature. So what I recommend is that you bring your little wall charger that actually plugs into the wall brick, and use that to charge your phone instead of your laptop or your desktop, because again, you want to try to avoid plugging this into your PC unless you absolutely are trying to transfer something off of your phone or not. That leads us into the next topic, public charging stations. Sometimes you'll see these set up at malls, or you'll see them set up at hotel lobbies or airports, things of that nature. Again, there's good ones out there, but there's also malicious ones out there, and it's called juice jacking. And what does it do? Well, it will charge your phone, but the minute you plug that in, if it's a malicious one, it's going to suck everything off your phone while it's charging it, all your photos, all your emails, all your contacts, everything. It's going to pull everything off your phone through that cable that you think you're just charging, and it's going to steal your information, and they're going to use that against you, or use it against whoever maybe one of your contacts are. Again, if you're traveling and you find yourself that you need this, these can go, the wall bricks, the small ones can go in your carry-ons, and you can charge it that way. I'm not saying every public charging station out there is malicious. However, it's going to be real difficult to figure out which ones are malicious and which ones are not malicious. So I would just recommend not even using them. Use your wall bricks to charge your devices. Excuse me. That leads us into passwords. So what about passwords? So in the beginning of the presentation, you may have noticed that there was a large online password management system vendor in that list of breached breached companies. So here's what I recommend. I personally don't use password managers, and I'll explain how I record my passwords. I don't trust anybody with my passwords except for me. That's me. That doesn't mean you can't use your online password managers or whatever it is. You're more than welcome to do it, but keep in mind, if it is a cloud-based password management system that stores your passwords and maybe populates them for you automatically, they are huge targets because the bad guys know everyone's passwords are in those vaults. So of course they're going to be targeted. So just keep that in mind. And out of the 5 big ones that are out there, 3 of them have been breached and 2 of them have been breached multiple times. So if you want to trust your passwords with somebody else watching the gate, you're welcome to do that. Me, no thank you. And I'll explain how I record my passwords going forward here. So what I recommend, and we'll explain why this is here, but I recommend complex, secure, and unique passwords. What does that mean? It means it has to be at least 10 characters at minimum. It has to contain at least 1 special character. That is, out of those 10, it has to have at least 1 of these. It's like an ampersand, a pound sign, an exclamation mark, @ sign, things of that. That's a special character. It also has to contain at least 1 uppercase letter and 1 lowercase letter. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, great. I also say that you have to have a unique password for every single site you go to. Everyone's probably saying, okay, well, how do I remember these? If you're telling me I don't, not to store them in an online manager, but to have a unique password for every site I visit, and it's got to be 10 characters long and have all this complexity to it. Well, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Me personally, I store my passwords on an encrypted USB key, something similar to this. This isn't the actual key, but it's something similar to this. So I have to memorize 1 single password to unlock this key. So if I were to drop this or lose this, if someone found this, the only way they can get access to this is to know what that password is. That password is a 28-digit password. And by the time someone cracks that, it's millions of years down the road, and we're all probably, well, at least I will be, long gone before anybody really physically could break into this. I do have paper copies of this as well, and I'll explain that in a second here, just in case I do lose this, because I only know 1 password to get into this. Everything else is on a text file, literally a plain text file that is on here. However, if by chance someone does get into this, the passwords that are listed in that text file aren't really the whole entire true passwords. So what does that mean? Well, it could have missing characters. I know what those missing characters are on that list. So when I look at that list, I know that whatever the password is there isn't the real password. I might have to add a character at the beginning, or maybe 2 characters at the beginning. I know what those characters are that I have to add. I know that. The other thing could be adding characters. So I might have additional characters that are added to that password list. There might be 2 at the beginning, 2 at the end, 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end, whatever that pattern is. I know what those characters are. I also know where they are. So if anybody comes across that list again, it's going to be worthless. They're going to try the way it's written there, and it's not going to work. So the one thing that you do need to keep in mind, even if you're not using an encrypted and you're just storing this on a Word file or Excel spreadsheet or whatever method you're using, if it's missing characters, you're usually okay. If it's added characters, you have to be careful, because there's software out there that if you're using the same added characters on every one of your passwords, it will detect that and guess what the password is in between that automatically. So you've got to randomize those characters. For you, it doesn't really matter, because you just know you need to drop the first 2 or the last 2, whatever that may be. So it doesn't matter if they're randomized or not. Whereas the missing characters can all be the same. Let's say you're adding AB to every one of your passwords in the beginning. You know that. Nobody else does. You keep those same letters. It's just a matter of where that pattern is and how that pattern works. So it's a way of recording your passwords without truly recording your entire password. Hopefully that makes sense. You could do a combination of both. You could do added and missing. That gets really complicated. But you know, it's really up to you. Like I said, I store my own passwords. I constantly, you know, I even show passwords during meetings sometimes of what all my logins. I'll show you my passwords because you're never going to guess what they are. Because I do use missing and added characters. I know what's missing. I know what's added. You as a viewer would have no clue what it is. So good luck. Good luck figuring it out. So I have no problem doing that. Now, as I mentioned, I do keep paper copies of this. And I do that because if I were to lose this, again, I don't know what they are. So I keep one in my safety deposit box at my financial institution. I also keep one in the safe at my home. But again, if someone were to break in there, again, these passwords are manipulated, that they're not the real passwords. My wife also knows what that manipulation is. So in the event that something were to physically happen to me, she would be able to know what those passwords are too. So just keep in mind that that's a way of recording those passwords. Here's why I recommend 10 characters. As you can see, almost anything less than 8 characters with today's brute force technology, and what that means is every possible combination of an 8-digit password at worst case scenario would get guessed in 39 minutes or less, depending on the complexity. So in 39 minutes, I can guess every possible combination of an 8-digit password in 39 minutes or less. Let that sink in for a second. It's incredible. And this is going to change because the technology is getting faster and faster and faster. So I started out last year recommending 7 digits, and it went to 9 digits. And at the end of the year, I was up to 10 digits. And you can see even at 10 digits with our recommended, it's 5 months. And that's actually high right now. It's probably more like 3 months because new technology came out that makes this potentially faster to guess. So just keep that in mind, that this is a constant moving target. So as hardware gets updated, these numbers get smaller and smaller and smaller. But you can see, you know, an 18-digit password, if you're using complexity that we recommend, you know, that's trillions of years right now. So that's what I'm saying. You know, high number character passwords are a lot safer than the smaller ones. But that's why we recommend what we recommend. So the other thing to keep in mind, we touched a little bit on this multi-factor. What is multi-factor? Multi-factor is an extra layer of security. It's not 100% foolproof, but what it does, it's based on something you know and something you have. So the something you know is your username and password. The something you have is usually a secondary device or a token that has some sort of code, or you have to approve if it's a push that, okay, you log in with your password, it's going to prompt you, okay, hey, what's the 6-digit code that's on your authentication app? You look at that number rotates every minute, and you type that in quick before it hits the end, and it logs you in. So again, you have to have your cell phone or a token that's generating that code. Sometimes it'll actually push saying, hey, are you trying to log in? And then you hit accept. The problem with that, and as I mentioned, this stops about 90% of the hacker attempts. It's not 100% foolproof, but it is better than just having usernames and passwords. The problem with the push ones is the next problem. The bad guys realize that a lot of folks are doing push, and they're using a technique that's called MFA fatigue. So what they're doing is they're spam bombing that push to your phone in hopes that you finally get so frustrated that you hit accept, and you're basically letting them in and bypassing the multi-factor thing. So if all of a sudden you're starting to get texts and all kinds of alerts on your phone, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, please, for the love of God, please do not click accept. Either call us if you're a customer of ours, or talk to your IT, because somewhere along the line, your password has been compromised. Now, this MFA fatigue only happens if your password has already been compromised. So the only thing keeping the bad guys out right now is your MFA. That's why they're spam bombing you, hoping they can get past that last step, because if they do, they're in. What you need to do is, like I said, talk to your IT. They need to immediately change your whatever your password is, because it's been compromised at that point. That's the only way this works. So just keep that in mind. So just some reminders, as we wrap up here, don't click emails or click links in emails. I would say the only time you can do that, because I did mention that, is that if you just reset your password, sometimes it will send you an email saying, hey, was this you? You can do that, but again, a lot of times they won't do that. Also verify the person is who they're claiming to be, either physically, in person, or at a known number. Use strong passwords and MFA. Store your passwords securely, whatever method it is you want to use. You're welcome to use the online managers if you like. Make sure that accounts are disabled for any former employees. And then also make sure that you're doing regular backups of your data. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of what is going on out there in the cybersecurity realm. We do these on a monthly basis. The content does change frequently because the bad guys' tactics change frequently. So I try to update these as often as I need to. Some of the tactics are the same, but sometimes they do change too. So some next steps, there you will get a certificate from us. I'll also check the questions here as well. I don't know if I see any questions in the chat here. If there are any questions, feel free to ask them there, or you can send them to info. We also have a YouTube channel that touches base on a little bit more of some of this stuff from social media. They're podcasts, so they're very quick, 15 minutes. I would recommend checking them out. It also talks about using public wireless at coffee shops, hotels, things of that nature. This isn't just business oriented, it's also personal. So a lot of this would tie to your personal habits as well too. So make sure you check that out. If you do want to see any other events that are coming up here, you can check them out at PCATG.com on our events page. And that is pretty much about it, I believe. I don't see anything. Oh, we do have one question here. How do you enable the email notification in Outlook? If you're talking about the external one that we mentioned, that would have to be done at your M365 tenant. I'm not sure if you're a client of ours or not, but that is something that we could handle if you are. If not, I would suggest contacting your either your internal IT. They could activate that at the M365 side for you or your existing IT provider. So if it is us, just reach out to us and we could very easily activate that for you. Hopefully that answers your question there, Dave. Any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat. Again, if you do have anything there, you're welcome to send them to info and we will be happy to answer them for you. Again, thank you for your time today. Hopefully this was enlightening, and sorry for going a few minutes over. But sometimes it happens. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and talk to you soon. Thanks.